Hello and welcome to the Gold, Goats, and Guns podcast. This is episode 26. My name is Tom Luongo. It is Tuesday, March 24th, 2020, and we have a lot to talk about. And today, I have two things for you. I'm going to talk for about 15 minutes about money and about what I see as a very dangerous escalation of the argument in favor of pure government fiat money in a world where everything has blown up. And then after that, I have a treat for you because my guest from episode 1, Mike Shedlock, otherwise known as Mish, and I sit down for about a half an hour to talk about some of the reality of where we are and where we're going. And while we have that discussion, I want you to understand that much of what Mike and I are talking about are ultimately practical things that we can do policy-wise right now that aren't doctrinaire Austro-libertarian in nature, but are the least bad decisions we can make under the current situation. So I want to get started by making a very important point. I have noticed very clearly an uptick in what I'm going to call greenbacking. We're seeing people from all over the dissident media make the argument now for modern monetary theory, otherwise known as MMT, which is nothing more than a restatement of greenbacks. Now, what were greenbacks? Greenbacks were issued during the Civil War by Abraham Lincoln as a form of government scrip to just pay for bills. And it was not debt-backed, purely paper money. And greenbackers have been making the argument that that's what we should be moving towards for close to a generation now. And the Bible of modern greenbacking theory is Ellen Brown's Web of Debt. Now, I absolutely urge you to go back and do some reading on the historical fight between Dr. Gary North of the Mises Institute and Lew Rockwell and his own site, GaryNorth.com, and how he has went through day by day for months debunking point after point after point of Ellen Brown's book. And the archives on this are legendary, and I will have a link in the show notes to this afterwards. I've been reading this archives of this all morning before recording this podcast just to make sure that I remember most of Dr. North's arguments. I internalized all of this stuff 12 years ago when it was happening during the last financial crisis. And understand that it was nonsense then, it was monetary crankism then, and it's monetary crankism today. Ellen Brown, Max Kaiser, Martin Armstrong, and now I've seen an article this morning from, it's on Fort Russ by Matthew Ehret, doing the linguistic legerdemain to tell us all, to regurgitate all of Ellen Brown's points about how great greenbacks were during the Civil War, during the New Deal, but leaving out that it was also used to fund the Nazi war machine in the 1930s, and it has effectively been used multiple times in the past to allow governments to go to war against its own people and against its neighbors. These people have always been here. They are the true rentier class that wants to destroy the value of money in order to create their socialist utopia. They are fantasists. They are insane. They are self-contradictory, especially in the case of Martin Armstrong, who will decry socialism on the one hand and then argue for greenbacks on the other, when greenbacks have always been the fundamental philosophical argument of socialists who don't believe that profit is anything other than exploitation. And because of this, we have to remember just how far removed from reality this theory of greenbacks is. New version of it is modern monetary theory. And I've been arguing with people behind the scenes viciously for weeks now about this. And the best response that we can make to this crisis right now is to lower the costs of the real economy, to lower the regulations, to get rid of the burden, the debt burden of the current economy, and to free up the actual people going to work every day, producing real goods and real services that are demanded on a daily basis in order for us to eat, live, fight off this virus and everything else. And if some of our recommendations from an Austro-libertarian perspective sound contradictory, well, fine. We live in a world of least bad options. This is a phrase that Mike will use in the upcoming interview. But understand that we're dealing with a very pernicious thing here. This is the failure of socialism in every way. Monetary socialism, which has begotten institutional socialism, which has distorted capital markets in every way. And the shuck and jive they're going to do, the bait and switch they're going to do here is they're going to continue to decry the evil bankers and their debt-based banker money and say, well, we can just print money out of thin air. And that would be better for the people, that we can create a new form of currency that isn't debt-based to the bankers and to the investors in the country, the old Hamiltonian argument, by just taxing the money and keeping that flow alive. And that's how we're going to that's how we're going to continue to create value and offset the issuance of new monetary units. But the money is never extinguished. It's just recycled and then into new government programs and back and forth. And you will hear Martin Armstrong go on about this for days on end, that the quantity theory of money is wrong. He's wrong. He's a traitor. He doesn't see where the money goes. He only sees that, oh, well, inflation didn't rise. Using CPI inflation to prove that the quantity theory of money doesn't work is moronic. And it's absolutely, in every way, manner, shape, and form, intellectually dishonest. Because the money does go places. It goes into a stock market that's at 29,000. It goes into leveraging up the value of our homes and our cars and these leveraged buybacks of stock and CEO salaries and yacht prices and all the rest of it. Because the government is incapable of actually telling you the truth about anything. We continue to heuristically adjust the CPI every freaking quarter in order to hide the fact that inflation is running rampant. Or do we buy half gallons of ice cream anymore? No, we buy 1.5 containers of ice cream anymore. Do we buy 1 quart bottles of soda? No, we buy 20 ounces or 24 ounces. It's the same thing everywhere. Do we buy 1 pound packs of coffee anymore? No, we buy 12 and 10 ounce packs. And the Fed has changed the rules on how they calculate inflation based on package size as opposed to unit cost per ounce. Why? Because they're trying to get rid of the inflation. It's nonsense on its face. It's disgusting and it's disturbing, and it needs to be refuted at every level. And we have to take this fight on. And we have to resist the calls for any form of real MMT and real greenbacking. Money has to always and without fail represent some form of antecedent value in the form of past opportunity cost taken by a human being, and then use that antecedent value and that opportunity cost, which the money unit, the commodity that is the money, that represents as a claim against a tangible object, which we trade for another claim to a tangible object. That's how this works. That's the real economy. And there is no way of getting around this. And the utopian fantasists don't want to understand this. They're now going to be out in force attacking Adam Smith and the scarcity economy, saying we don't need scarcity. Scarcity concepts don't exist. We have the printing press. Literally, this is what they are saying. And that is nonsense. They hate Bitcoin to a huge degree. Why? Because they understand that Bitcoin is a rational interpretation of the hard money standard applied to a digital economy by creating digital monetary units that represent antecedent value and previously done work. That's why they hate it, and that's why they don't want to see it exist. They would rather the tokenized economy of Ethereum, where we just tokenize everything. And even then, it's not even terrible. But understand that this is where we are right now. The cries for this are going to be through the roof. The Democrats are holding back the stimulus package, which I'm absolutely and thoroughly and utterly against, in order to get their Green New Deal through. It's coming, and it's coming in a way that should scare all of us. And we, as hard money advocates, as advocates for rational economic output and for civilization, this is a cultural war, absolute cultural war against the idea that profit is exploitation and that voluntary trade is a win-lose proposition in a zero-sum game, and the opposite side of that, which is that voluntary exchange only comes when both people feel that they've won, because the exchange itself represents an exchange of comparative advantage of one person's gifts versus another person's gifts, and that both save the ultimate scarce natural resource, which is their time. These people want to steal your time from you. They don't care that they steal it through constant debt payments or through inflation. At the end of the day, they are all wrong. They tell you that they're against the quantity theory of money, and then they invoke Irving Fisher, who created the goddamn quantity theory of money. It makes me sick to my stomach to listen to this nonsense. But yet, this is where we are. So watch very carefully for Pied Pipers. Watch very carefully for the shuck and jive, because it's here, it's coming, and if we're not careful, we're not going to be able to stop it. The truth of the matter is that we're not going to be able to stop it. And the initial response to all of this, whatever they do, is going to be good. It's going to stabilize things for 6 months or a year or so. And then it's all going to collapse again, just like it did during the early phases of the New Deal. One of the points that's not brought up during my talk with Mike is that what bailed out the New Deal had nothing to do with the New Deal. Nothing to do with FDR's draconian destruction of capital and the confiscation of gold. It had everything to do, Gary North said ages ago, it had everything to do with creating FDIC. Because at that point, the government started to create the confidence that people could go back into the banking system. Without FDIC, there was no stopping the deflationary wave. Today, FDIC barely covers anybody's losses here. And when the banks start to go under, this is when we're going to see the reality of the FDIC backstop revealed to be inadequate. And then what happens then? And they're just trying to get through the next 5 months now, or the next 6 months now. We're not even talking about what happens when the defined benefit pension systems that need an 8% yield and can't get it anymore through the continual Ponzi scheme issuance of junk bond debt in the fracking industry, when that explodes. And that's coming. What are we going to do then? We're going to bail all those people out too? We should start there today. All right, I'm going to pop off now, and we're going to listen to the rant between me and Mike from last night. I hope you all enjoy it, and we'll talk next week. Be well. Keep your stick on the ice. I have the great pleasure of having my first guest back again from episode 1, Mike Shedlock, or otherwise known as Mish. And Mike is an Austrian economist like myself, and a great market analyst and a great commentator on the markets in general. I've been a fan of Mike for years. Been a great opportunity to sit down and chat with him. We're going to chat today about the effects of the coronavirus and on the domestic economy here in the U.S., as well as what is likely to happen next, and why I think a lot of people are crazy in thinking that what we're dealing with now is it'll all be over in 6 weeks and we'll be able to go back to normal. I don't think that's going to happen. Neither does Mike, and we're going to get into that over the course of the next half an hour or so. So good morning, Mike, or good afternoon, Mike, and welcome to the show, and thanks for doing this.
Pleasure to be back on, Tom.
So the latest post you have up over at your site over at Mish Talk, or moneymaven.io/Mish Talk, it's a great post called "The Single Worst Jobs Report Coming Up," and it's a really detailed post about some notes you took from a piece by Jim Bianco over Bianco Research, presentation of about an hour and 10 minutes or so that I haven't had a chance to watch yet. But I think the points that Jim makes and that you summarize throughout the post are really, really interesting about the effects of coronavirus. So why don't you go through what your thesis is at this point, and where you think we are and where we're going to wind up going from here?
Sure. First off, thanks to Jim Bianco for an excellent presentation. It was really long. I ended up playing the thing twice, all the way through, an hour and 8 minutes, and I picked up 20 things out of his post, and I believe I have them right. And these scars, number one, these scars are going to last for a generation. The credit ETFs are telling us that we've still not found the correct price level. This is something I've commented on myself before, that the jobs reports in April and May will be the worst in history. I came up with my own numbers, and they're a lot worse than what the analysts are saying. Jim expects negative earnings for the year. That's point number 4. There's going to be a new way of doing business. We're not going to be looking to outsource to China forever and ever. We've got a glut in crude, and right now Saudi Arabia is quite happy with that because it's hurting Russia, Iran, and the U.S. frackers. China is going to suffer permanent damage. This is something I've been talking about actually for years, Tom. Everyone's, thought that the Chinese economic miracle was going to last forever. They were going to pass the United States up and the U.S. would become a third world country. I never bought into that. Jim said that the gold and silver were struggling to find an equilibrium level, and I'm wondering, he wrote this last Friday. I'm wondering if we found it today. Gold was up to almost $75. There's a huge change in risk parity. The relationships between stocks and bonds is breaking down. We're going to have gargantuan deficits, as far as the eye can see. Jim thinks we need, even though he's an Austrian libertarian, he thinks we need fiscal stimulus like we've never seen before. We'll need to talk about that. One aspect of that I certainly agree with is that we are in a world of least bad options. That's a direct quote. I'll agree with him there, even if we disagree on some of the stimulus aspects. Corporate buybacks are gone. There's going to be less globalization. This is going to depress earnings. We're going to have higher interest rates and higher rates of inflation after the crisis. And whether or not we have a prolonged depression depends on the amount of corruption in Washington. And and I know that that's likely to stay for a while. He doesn't think the Fed will buy stocks. I don't either. The Fed won't position rates negative. I don't think they will either. I think the Fed learned a lesson from Japan and Europe that doesn't work. The Elon Musk theory that this is all going to go away and we're going to be back to buying 120,000 cars. Well, I don't think so. Neither does Jim, and I doubt if you do. One thing I think we can all agree on, people aren't going to forget this. This is not 9/11. It's not 1987. Every crisis is different. This is not like the last two. And he thinks a national cryptocurrency is coming. I do too. He thinks the next reserve currency is going to be a global crypto. I think we're quite a ways away from that, if ever, because I don't see the U.S. giving control of his currency. Your thoughts?
All of those things are very interesting, and many of them I do fundamentally agree with. You and I are on the opposite sides of things about cryptos, but as far as this whole thing is concerned, that's a discussion for a much different day. I think the world looks a lot different 10 years from now. I think the next 5 years are the important part. And I agree with everything that Jim laid out, which is that we are looking at a different world after this. By the way, as I'm doing this, I have your article open and I have the gold price open, and gold just past 1,600. We're doing this the night of March 23rd, the Monday night before we publish this. And gold is now up effectively $110 since Sunday night in 24 hours. So I don't think gold has even begun to get get started here, because the reality, I think, is that we may need some kind of the big point for me is the fiscal stimulus. This is where we as Austro-libertarians are going to argue against the mainstream. Everybody is like screaming for $2 trillion, or the Democrats want 2.5. The Fed, the Republicans today only wanted 1.8. They're going to fight about this for the rest of the week. It doesn't really matter. I think that the big thing here is that we're arguing for deflation, or at least some form of deflation. And because it's here anyway, the whole market is deflating. So now the question is, in what way can we actually help and support Main Street in a way that will actually be efficacious, right? And I haven't heard anything from anyone saying anything that gives me any remote amount of comfort as to what's going to happen next. I was talking to a friend of mine this afternoon, and he said, one of the main things that we can do right now is to backstop muni bonds. This is as if we're going to do this kind of, if the Fed's going to intervene here, one of the things we can do is to intervene in the muni bond market, because rents are going to have to drop. The landlords are going to be in trouble. We already saw a post on Zero Hedge before we did this. The CMBS market, the commercial mortgage-backed securities market, is already dead, right? So at a certain level, if we want to ensure that these people who are all going to lose their jobs, as you rightly point out, where do we start? We start by lowering their daily costs and their daily things. I would rather them spend 90 or $100 billion guaranteeing and paying everybody's electric bill in the United States for the next 3 months, and doing an income tax holiday for the next 3 months, rather than what they're gonna do. And as a start,
income tax holiday, if I can interject
sure.
there, that only helps those people who are working. I've got a lot of friends like myself who are individual. They're sole proprietors. They work for themselves. There is no unemployment insurance for these people. There's never any unemployment insurance for me. And I went through this in 2003, by the way, 2001, 2003. I was out of a job, Tom, for almost 2 years. Very few people even realize that. I started writing my blog in March of 2003 as an act of desperation. I was hoping, praying that someone would find me and hire me as a writer, and no one wanted me. Right. And guess what? I started making some decent calls, and my blog took off, and I was able to support myself simply off of ad income. And guess what? I would not go back to work for corporate America ever again.
You and me both, man. I lost my job at Newsmax, writing the newsletter for them in 2017. I didn't have anything else, and that's what I started doing here. That's why I got back into doing this, doing the blog publicly, and slowly but surely I was able to put an income together with it. So yeah, I get it. I know exactly how you feel.
What can we do for those people, or should we do anything? Do we toss them all under the rug? My huge gripe looking back at 2008, Tom, was like we bailed out all of the banks, all of the corrupt financial institutions, all of these CEOs who went on to make billions of dollars for themselves. And countrywide CEO, what was that guy's name? Anyway, he made $1 billion. He cashed out $1 billion worth of stock options over the years. And these are the people we actually bailed out. And so it's no wonder that we have this tiff now in Congress of what are you going to do for us? My problem is, what else is hidden in that bill? They want a $15 minimum wage. What is that going to do to the business owner who's hiring somebody who can't afford to pay $15?
I know.
So it's, as Bianco said, it's a question of least bad options.
Yep.
But I don't even think we're in the right ballpark here as to what we should be doing.
I know we're not in the right ballpark, and the thing that scares me is, like everything else, I really want to see this. I want to see the focus put back on what can we do to lower costs locally. So, okay, gasoline demand is through the floor. We should be suspending federal gas tax. I think you and I talked about this last night when we were prepping for this show. That's just one little thing. There's federal local hospitality taxes, local property taxes. Just suspend them for 3 months. Don't worry about it. If you backstop the muni bond market, where most of these people are, that would be the biggest roadblock to getting county governments to suspending property taxes for a couple of months or even a year. I mean, what is that bill at the end? What is that bill at the end of the year? Considering the numbers that they're talking about now, and knowing full well that 6 months from now, we're going to be dealing with a defined benefit pension meltdown at the state and corporate level, like that dwarfs everything we're discussing today. Okay, if we don't get the economy, the local economy back and running, so that the local farmers can produce food and buy hay and buy feed and buy grain in order to get the stuff to the stores. At the end of the day, if we suspend federal gas tax, for example, the price of food drops by 30%. Because how much money is it cost to get, to transport food around the country to get it to your stores, right? You may not be leaving your house and driving as much as you were before, but I got news for you: the trucks are still running, right? So there's one. I mean, there's so many little things that we can be doing, lowering people's cost to actually live their lives. And yeah, because look, the real estate market is already starting to drop, right? I have a subscriber who's actively looking for a house right now, and she's literally amazed at how quickly prices, places she's looking at, like every day, they're dropping by $10,000, $12,000, $15,000 a day, right? What they want for these places. Like, the property taxes that those sales go through are going to have. The counties better just get ready for it right now anyway. So let's start that process. Let's start laying off government workers, because the real workers who fundamentally make the economy run, they need to be supported here by not being priced out of the labor market. And the amount of money circulating through the local economy needs to stay local. It's so very important. Like, I'm going to buy a cow from a farmer friend of mine and put it in a chest freezer, knowing full well that I probably am over preparing for this, but yeah, it's still a good price. And I know that it's going to help him, and it's going to help the meat processor, and this person and that person and all these people. And that money stays here in my area of the world where it belongs and keeps them alive. So it's the best I can do.
Yeah, it is going to be brutally tough. Mm-hmm. Yet I look at all of these estimates from Goldman Sachs. Right now, there's this rush now to downgrade the economic hit in the second quarter. We're up to 30% in some of them. And one of the Fed governors, was it Bullard, come out and was talking about 50%. And then, just like magic, Tom, the everything's going to be, we're going to have this huge rebound in the third quarter and fourth quarter, and then for the whole year, GDP is only going to be down 1%. Now,
nonsense.
Nonsense. Absolutely
nonsense. It's crazy, and the thing, it's complete nonsense, right? There's no way that's not going to happen. Like, it's not just like writing off the quarter. The quarter's gone. Like, I think the thing that's going on right now is that the Fed is just trying to get us through to the end of the quarter, because they're not even sure what's going to happen once April 1st comes, and all of the and all the Basel III rules and all the FASB rules and Dodd-Frank and everything else, whatever's out there, all those the capital adequacy rules that are going to come into place once we move into the first day of Q2. I think that's what everybody's really worried about at this point. I know that's what the Fed's worried about, and they're trying to get us through that end of the quarter push. It's part of the reason why I don't think this is going to get any better until the first week of April.
We're going to have a bad jobs report in April, but that'll be for March. More than likely, an even worse one's coming in May.
Yeah.
We'll see, and they're talking about 9-10% rates of unemployment. Just looking at the surveys that are coming now, and the one that I was looking at is actually a week old now. So there might be a more updated one. I figured 12% right off the bat. That's just right now. But even worse yet is all the people now, the hours are being cut and cut and cut. And some of these people are working, 5, 6, maybe 10 hours when they were working 30 before.
Right.
I have U6 unemployment based off of the numbers I've seen, close to 40%. There's just no way that $1,000 for a couple months is going to get these people back on the feet. Okay, no. They can suspend their income taxes, and they can suspend their property taxes, but suspending it and canceling it are two completely different things. Yep. Now, these $1,000 checks, this is genuine helicopter money, Tom. Mm-hmm. This is, people always talked about where the Fed was going to issue helicopter money. The Fed cannot issue helicopter money. However, Congress can, and they will. We're debating now here, what strings are going to be attached to this. Yep. But if it has to be paid back, then it's not helicopter money. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, no, if there's going to be debt associated with it, it's not helicopter money. All we're doing is robbing again from the future. We're just robbing from my daughter's future and her daughter's future and probably her daughter's future. We're already levered up to the point where I think the grandkids are already in debt up to their eyeballs. It's from where we are right now. It's ludicrous. And honestly, the debt needs to be written down and written off is the important part here. And we just need to get real with that reality, that there's no easy way out of this other than everybody has to take a hit, and we can't just say, well, the banks are doing God's work and they get to be bailed out. We can't do that. We have to look at things that I keep going back to the Panic of 1857 when people ask me what I think should be done. And Buchanan is roundly considered to be the worst president in the history of the United States and it has nothing to do with not stopping Southern secession. It had everything to do with not bailing the banks out in the Panic of 1857. His attitude. Now, things were simpler back then, but the basic idea is the same. This is your problem, he said to the banks. It's not the country's problem. My job is to make sure that the local and regional banks have enough specie, enough currency to be able to keep the local economies running while you guys shut down and work out how you're going to write this stuff off. And that's what he did. And that's what we need to do today in whatever form. And if it means that we can't do something as simple and as draconian as that, fine. But that has to be the framework under which we go forward, because it's purely about the people and the real economy and not all the debt and the investor class munging up the works. That's the problem.
Yeah, if you look at the bank stock index, it's down 45 or 50%. I didn't look at it today, so I'm not sure the current state of affairs. But that's telling you,
yes,
that despite all of this talk that the banks are well capitalized,
they're not.
Well, are they really?
No.
The sad thing is they're way better capitalized than the banks in Europe.
Yep. Yep. And I said, I tweeted out when you published the article earlier today, I tweeted out, I said, this is a great article by Mike and good on him for and everybody should read it. And my only complaint about the entire thing is that it's like it's everything else. It's domestically focused. And as bad as our numbers are, and as bad as this picture that has been painted is, which it's real and it's terrible. Europe is worse. And what happens when when everybody finally realizes how bad off Europe is, which they're beginning to realize when you see the euro collapse in 7 trading days from $1.15 to $1.65, like literally in 7 trading days. Everybody's beginning to get the idea that capital has to flow over here, and it's going to actually put a floor under our markets, not because of fundamentals, but because of there's a flood of money out there. And I live in Florida, and I see this all the time in hurricanes. Hey, here comes the water from the hurricane. And where does it go? It goes to where it can go. And it goes to the places that can actually hold that volume of water. And, that volume, that is our markets, which, for lack of a better term, are still the deepest and most liquid markets in the world and still most trusted. So, as bad as they are. I'm really worried. That's when I see coming at some point, and I don't think we're not there yet. But I think that's what's coming. So,
no, the Fed once again is trying to prevent Marktomarket. Well, we can suspend it.
Yes.
And by the way, this is what they did to revive the credit market in 2009, in March of 2009. This is one of the things that I agree with John Hussman about in spades. The stock market took off and never looked back when they suspended Marktomarket. That was a mistake.
Yep.
We never washed out. We never got rid of the zombie corporations. We have more zombie corporations now than ever, and all the Fed knows how to do is to try and bail them out.
Yep, I know, and because that's what their mandate is, and it's sad that's not going to improve anytime soon. I don't see it improving. And I mean, the only thing I do see is that Powell, I doubt, with his private equity background, is going to go to negative interest rates, which you said earlier, and I agree with. And I think does fundamentally understand that Larry Summers is wrong and that negative interest rates are capital destructive. And
that's the lesson from Europe.
Is starting. Absolutely.
The European banks are clobbered. Look at Deutsche Bank. There's tons of derivatives, and all of a sudden it has to pay to get access to money. What has got excess deposits? I mean, what a total complete failure. The Fed cannot see its own mistakes, but fortunately, in this case, I believe it can see the mistakes of Europe. That's about the only thing positive I can say for these guys, actually, though, and that's pretty sad.
It is. It is, and we hate to be like, doom and gloom and everything, but it's like this is the reality. Like this is what we Austrians have been arguing about, and arguing, been worrying about for decades. And it's, at some point, timing is for the gods, and we've been saying that for a long time. That okay, so when is this going to all melt down? It melts down when there are no more greater fools. It melts down when the Ponzi scheme on top of a Ponzi scheme on top of a Ponzi scheme that is the world, that is a global economy. It melts down when there's no more greater fools. And I think we've reached that moment of who are we going to sell this crap to next? I don't know, because it ain't going to be me. And frankly, it ain't going to be the class of people that have bailed us out in the past. There's no productive capacity. One of the things that David Stockman brought up when I chatted with him a couple of times, he's, in his last book, Peak Trump, he talked about this. He's like, we were able to get out of this in 2008, 2009, because China still had excess capacity. And China levered up an incredible credit bubble over the last 12 years. And now, they've run out. They don't have any more capacity. So something has to give here, that we're not going to be able to, now we've reached that hard moment where, okay, if we can't sell it to anybody else, then the debt has to be written down. And everything that the Fed and all of the central banks have ever done has been to try and, forestall that moment where their friends in the banking system have to actually deal with the write-downs, where they can't take advantage of writing down the debt on the regional banks and then buying them up at the pennies on the dollar in order to recapitalize, which is what they did in 2008, right? And same thing that they did in 29 and 30, and 31, 32. All the regional banks went bust, and the larger banks won. And by the end of the Great Depression, before it started, 70% of the banks in America weren't on the Federal Reserve System. By the time it was done, all of them were. I wonder why. So,
if we look at China in isolation here, which
sure.
All their state-owned enterprises, bankrupt.
Yep.
The China kept inflating a property bubble after property bubble after property bubble.
Mm-hmm.
So what are they going to do for an encore here? Eventually they want to get to some sort of consumer-led economy over there. But how does the U.S. play into that? What is going to happen in the meantime? China still does not want to write off all of this debt, which means it's going to go back. I look at all of these nations; they're all going to continue, trying what we've proven does not work. Mm-hmm. The Fed, repos and liquidity. Great. And I hear people talking about this being another liquidity crisis. This isn't a liquidity crisis. This is a solvency crisis when people can't pay their bills because they're out of work.
And there's a bifurcation problem in trust within the global banking system because of the fundamental difference between the way the ECB is capitalized and the way the Fed and the BOJ and a lot of the other ones are capitalized. And that lack of trust between them means that there's a collateral shortage in the interbank market, which is what seized up originally in September of last year. Jeff Snyder's done unbelievable work over at Lombard Partners, unbelievable work to explain it in his own inside baseball way. And if you don't understand like the jargon, he's impossible to read, but Jeff understands this stuff at a level that, I still don't, but I understand it well enough, thanks to him, that it's very clear that we have a collateral problem. And, at these rates, because since we don't have market clearing rates for, what people are willing to lend to each other in the interbank markets, the Fed keeps stepping in to try and to offer up elastic money to them in order to get them through. And they're like, yeah, but I don't want to borrow at 0.5%. I don't want to sell that security to you at 0.5%. I want 6%. Well, the Fed's like, we can't do 6%. I need to defend the illusion that I control monetary policy. When no, the Eurodollar market
going on in the bond ETF markets. The bond ETF markets, I mean, they're pretty liquid. Yeah. Okay, they're trading at a price that says we are at level A. The problem is all the banks, all the broker dealers loaded themselves up, with all of these assets, and they need price C.
Mm-hmm.
And so the Fed can come out there and offer all of this money, but these banks are already stuffed to the gills on these securities that are overpriced.
Right. Yep. And so they don't want to give them, and they don't trust the other banks are going to be able to pay. If you do start the repo, remember, because most people don't understand how the repo works. You sell the security back in order to get dollars, and then it's a payday loan between banks. And if you don't believe that the guy who's going to buy back the security that he sold you and reverse the transaction 3 days from now or 7 days from now, whatever the term on the contract is, then it's theft. Here you can have a security, but I got the money, which is what I needed, and then you can't reverse the trade. That's where we are, and that's where we've been for 6 months. And the Fed coming in and backstopping the repo market for 6 months, it was always going to collapse in this time frame. Mike, the coronavirus thing is just like the straw that broke the camel's back. It's like the thing that pricked the bubble.
Well, we were
headed for this.
Agree on this point. I didn't think this bubble was going to burst this fast. I had friends that said, well, it will, because that's what bubbles always do. But if you look at Japan, they had over the course of 10 or 15 years, they had 3 or 4, maybe even 50 or 100% rallies in the stock market. But guess what? At the end of 20 years, it fell from 45,000 all the way down to 6,000 or 7,000 or something. And people pretend that, this cannot happen here. Why can't it?
Right.
That's kind of the path that I thought we were on. But what happened with the coronavirus is, the market wants to reprice and get to where it needs to go to, not over the course of 10 years, but over the course of right now. This is why we've had this 30% decline, and maybe the Fed is going to arrest it here. Bianco has an idea that fair value is sort of around this place. I didn't comment on that too much. I think he's way too high here because there's simply been too much economic damage done. Mm-hmm. But the Fed's desperately trying to prevent us from getting to where we need to go, and the longer they succeed at that, the bigger the failure is going to be.
Yep. The more they intervene, the more the intervention will have to be tomorrow, right? Going back to Mises, every government intervention will beget an ever larger intervention the next time, and we're at that moment where this is telling us that the central banks don't have the answers, and and they're not going to have the answers, and they don't have the tools, and they've got the wrong economic theories about how to get out of this. They've always had them. Martin Armstrong says it's the death of Keynesianism. I'll go one step further. It's just the death of, I just honestly think it's the death of government-sponsored markets, at least here in the West. I don't, there's going to be a collapse in government, in the faith in government. It's already here. And it was already here to start out with. Congress has, an 8% approval rating? You think it's going to be any higher after this week? Where it doesn't even matter how much money they dump into the economy to try and keep it alive, right? It's the fact that they're playing partisan games to arrogate power to themselves that they didn't have yesterday when they already had too much power in the first place. And everybody thought they had too much power. And we're going to continue to play this game. Like, that's the thing that's what we don't ever recover from, I think.
And speaking of power, that's how I ended my post. Actually, was on a thought that Bianco didn't even bring up. There's 1,100 pages in the emergency legislation. What's in it? We still don't know. But what we do know, if this report is accurate, is that Politico and both Rolling Stone had recent articles on the suspension of habeas corpus. The Department of Justice is seeking emergency new powers. They want the ability to indefinitely hold people without trial during emergencies. I'm positive the Democrats won't give this power to Trump, but I'm equally sure that if the Republicans were in control of both the House, the Senate, and the White House, they would grant themselves this power. And I also think that even though the Democrats wouldn't give this power to a Republican, if they had control of the executive branch in both houses of Congress, they would pass this. Now the question is, would the Supreme Court strike this down, or would they go along with it? This is extremely scary stuff. We don't know what's going to come out of this politically yet. It's conceivable that Congress passes, some sort of thing. I mean, look at what the Democrats are trying to do. AOC wants the people, whoever that means, to be on the boards of the directors of these companies in return for bailouts. You're going to have pushing for Green New Deal. I believe that this stuff's already in these bills. We just don't see it. I don't know. I'm certainly scared of what's in there. The political ramifications here. I don't know what's going on, Tom, and it's scary.
It is scary. And I saw something on Fort Russ this morning, which was a paraphrase of a Newsweek article that I missed from a couple of weeks ago, explaining how they've got everything all lined up to suspend the civilian government and impose a military one. Now, in the case that that the civilian government becomes paralyzed, well, what's that definition? And given how badly everybody in Washington wants Donald Trump to not wield power, right? What's going to be their excuse for moving into a military takeover of the United States? I mean, this is what's going on. Everybody is kind of ready to stand up Alexander Haig-like. Remember when Reagan got shot, and say, I'm in charge now, and I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. And I'm telling you, we're getting prepped for this. This feels like V for Vendetta, for Christ's sake, Mike. Like, we've got a virus unleashed upon the people, and we've got everybody scared, and we're going to try and go for a full-on authoritarian lockdown, fascistic control of the entire country, if not the entire world, and do so with the intention of bailing out these incredibly inept people who have destroyed value, risk assessment, and a functioning economy. And this is their way of staying one step ahead of the Reaper, and as it were.
The saving grace right now, preventing anything ridiculous, is the executive and Congress are not all under one person.
One party's control. They hate each other so much at that level. Yeah, always pray for gridlock, right? So in some ways, the American voters are a lot smarter than they give us credit for, because we rarely ever give one party control of all three things: the Senate, the House, and the presidency. Rarely, and when we do, we quickly reverse that.
Well, I mean, the Republicans had it for a time, and I look at all the things that Trump could have done when he had that. Could have passed national bankruptcy legislation, freeing up corrupt states like mine, Illinois, to allow them to allow municipalities to go to bankrupt. I mean, good grief. I mean, Illinois which is one of the reasons why I have to get out of this state, is property taxes here absolutely crazy. $14,000 on a $400,000 house. That's nuts. You don't own property in Illinois. You rent it from the state.
Yep. Absolutely.
All of these things. Trump could have done something about military spending, and he
the opposites.
talk about draining the swamp. He didn't do it. He had people fighting him every step of the way. Now he did some good things.
Yep.
You know, I'm accused of always being critical of Trump. I happen to like the Supreme Court picks he made, and I've come out and I've said that. But we have hopes always that someone's going to get in there and change something, but they never do, except to make it worse. You know, one of my friends was telling me the other day, a millennial, and she told me, she goes, I'm for Biden. She goes, I want Biden to win the presidency. And she goes, but I want the Republicans, to win the House and the Senate. She goes, so nothing gets done. Yep. This is what we're hoping for, Tom. But they don't do anything.
Well, I remember this is, I remember it's like Lou Rockwell always, I learned it the knee of the best of them, right? So Lou was like, always pray for gridlock, and just hope that there's that they fight amongst themselves so they never actually get anything done, because bipartisanship is just their way of saying, oh, we're now gonna agree on how we're gonna screw you. That's because that's all bipartisanship is, right? Because ultimately it's just the Republicans and Democrats are two wings of the same birds of prey. In the immortal words of Tom Woods. So it's just funny, like where we are. I get the same thing all the time, that I'm way too critical of Trump. Look, I love a lot of the things he's done domestically. He's done some very good things domestically, and he's actually trying to do some very good things during this coronavirus thing to free up stuff in the healthcare system, and to do away with and take an axe to a lot of the really bad legislation or regulations that he in the healthcare industry, and so that when we come out of this on the other side, we can go, well, why should we ever go back to that old system? Because this system's so much better than it is now, than it was then. So maybe that's a good thing that'll come out of this. But it's always like, here, you can have this fig Newton, but we're going to take all of your meat. Okay. You're going to starve to death because you can have a fig Newton, but we gave you the fig Newton. You should be really happy that you got this fig Newton because it's really delicious, but we're taking all the meat and all the dairy and all the good food. Because that's who we are, and because some pigs are more equal than others, and it's just the way it is, man. And it's not going to change until we demand it change, and or we just all drop out, and this is why I keep saying we have to think in terms of our local economy. And oh, by the way, Mike, you're more than welcome to come visit us in Florida. Property taxes here are incredibly reasonable. And we don't have a state income tax, by the way. I love this state. And we all own guns, like at the end of the day. And we have nuclear power. And we have international ports. And we have international rail. And we grow our own food. Like, I'm all for Flexit, dude. I've got news for you. Like, ready for Flexit. I really am. So.
All right, Tom. With that, I got to run. I think we've covered all the bases that I wanted to get over.
Sounds great.
Anyway, people can find me at themoneymaven.io Mish Talk. Actually, the simple way to find me is just go to mishtalk.com, and that'll redirect. Yep. And what I'm going to remind everybody also, Mike's Twitter feed is excellent. It's Mish GEA, at Mish GEA on Twitter is excellent as well, and his blog is off the charts good. I am envious that you put out the amount of work that you put out on your blog. I put out some similar amount of work, but it goes in like 16 different directions in order to make sure that I have enough money to feed my family. So it's a very interesting thing, the way that works out. But honestly, people, you just read Mike's work on a regular basis. I do, and it's always a revelation. So whenever I'm stumped for ideas, I pop over to Mike's blog, and I'm like, oh, there's 16 things I can write about now. So it always makes me smile. So thank you, Mike, for your time and attention and your diligence and your regular insight into both the capital markets and the political system. I think it's invaluable at this day and age. So I appreciate you taking the time to do this with me this afternoon. Thanks, Tom, very much. I enjoyed being on the show, and look forward to doing the next one maybe in another few weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. We will absolutely do this again. You take care. You be well, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.